Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. I can't even believe we are at over 20,000 views. But let me ask you, have you ever wondered how you can turn your passion into money? Well, our next guest is going to tell you how he did it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. I am so excited to have in our studio today, Mr. Charles Clemons. Welcome, Mr. Charles Clemons. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, and I'm happy to have you here. So I'm looking at my phone because this is one of these guests where I have to read the bio because it's just so long. He's accomplished so many amazing things. And I definitely want the audience to know all the things that you've done. I've just learned today he calls himself Chuck. However, I'm not quite comfortable calling Mr. Charles Clemons my president, which you'll learn why I say that later. So Charles Clemons is not just a speaker. He's an experience. Okay, that's what this As a corporate trainer, coach, and pastoral counselor, Charles' journey began by witnessing his father's unwavering dedication as a pastor in New Jersey, one of my favorite places where I was born and raised. This exposure to transformative leadership in both inner city and rural communities laid the foundation for his impactful work. So he's had service across continents. He provides personal and organizational support, and he is a master, which you will see, at storytelling with impact. So we're going to talk about his books. We're going to talk about the work that he's done in Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe. We may need like 2 parts, I don't know. And his service with the UCLA Health LA, where he supports clients, patients, families, and first responders dealing with trauma and grief. So we've talked about trauma on the Ask Mrs. HR podcast, and we're going to tie it all together today. I think I got my work cut out to try to get it all in an hour because I think we could probably do a 5-part series. Mm-hmm. So welcome.
Glad to be here. Really excited.
Thank you. I'm so excited. You real excited?
Very excited.
Okay, what does real excited look like?
Well, for me, it's kind of like a volcano. I'm bubbling and just ready to blow up there.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, we're going to get started. So how long have you been doing the work that you do?
My goodness. Thank you. First, let me just say, grateful to be here. I've been involved in healthcare and forms of leadership for over 2 decades. I've worked with a number of nonprofits in the community. And as you shared, I'm grateful for the privilege to have traveled a bit with a nonprofit I worked with years ago called Children's Hunger Fund. Okay. And one way or another, I've worked with leadership. And this thing of storytelling has come up from time to time, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's nonprofits or with business. So roughly 2 decades of leadership development and training.
Okay. Yeah. So did you want to be a leader ever since you were little? Like ever since you were a little kid?
Not quite.
So what did young Charles want to do?
Well, interestingly enough, and you mentioned that my dad played a major role in my development. My pops was, as we call him, Pops. He was a good man. Oh. I mean, a really good man. God rest his soul. And as a preacher's kid, I remember seeing my dad speaking up front and watching his words have an impact on people, and not in a swarmy or fake way. Mm-hmm. He cared for people. Nice. And I had this sense of like, my dad's doing something important here. But at the same time, he's really down to earth, very country, and I'm going to get to answering that question.
Your time.
He was just the kind of person that he can talk to anybody. It could be somebody literally on the curb he's talking with, sharing a sandwich with, give him a lift. And at the same time, the same man, my dad, you see him shave, put on a suit, and take me with him. And he's in a board meeting and talking to leaders in the town, or he shows up at the school board of education and he's speaking. So I was drawn to leadership by my pop's example, that he was a servant leader before people used the title, throwing it around, just at least from what I saw. Mm-hmm. So gradually I found myself increasingly in environments where I was called on, like, hey, what do you think? What are your thoughts? And so Pop's story told a lot. He would
Yeah.
say something and then he would explain it with a story. And, as we used to say growing up, he would break things down. And so if someone was there and didn't understand it, he's like, let me tell it to you like this. And so long story short, I gravitated towards leadership because of what I saw.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you graduated from high school,
Mm.
where did you go? Did you go to college
Yes.
straight away?
Went straight to Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, just hop, skip, and a jump from New Jersey. Went there, had a bit of a track scholarship, and then also was looking at working with disabled kids and therapeutic rec and possibly physical therapy. So that's where I initially went for my undergraduate before later on getting my master's.
And what was your focus of study?
Interestingly, at the time, it was,
Mhm.
and this is a story of its own. I got into recreation because I worked with Boys and Girls Clubs. I was a mentor there. So my
Okay.
thought was getting a degree in that so I can go back and work in the Boys and Girls Club system. But while studying there, people may have heard of it, something called therapeutic recreation or rec therapy, like occupational physical therapy.
Mhm.
I found myself working with disabled veterans from that degree. So I went
Okay.
from the 4-year degree with RT to
Mhm.
working with Department of Veterans Affairs. And that's where just even the storytelling thing, I worked with a lot of Vietnam vets, a lot of black and brown folks that had some stories. Like I'm
Wow.
thinking of one guy who
Mhm.
survived a POW camp, not to get too deep, too
No,
heavy.
tell us. Tell
And,
us more.
and so these brothers, they really mentored me, even though I was there in a service capacity. They had this sense of, hey, we want something better for you. And this is what life has been like for us. These are battles we fought. So did that for roughly 10 years before transitioning more into chaplaincy and then later corporate training
Okay.
and leadership development. So this has all been a part of that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see what young Charles looked like because it's
Oh,
like you're packaged all it's kind of like me. We talk
yeah.
about this. I look like
Mm.
packaged all
Oh,
nice and tied up now.
no.
But what
Yeah.
was happening in between high school,
Mm.
college? How did you I know you
Listen.
pledged a certain
Oh,
fraternity.
yeah. Mega Psi Phi.
When did that happen?
Oh, boy. Well, since you brought it up, my son,
Yeah, that yes.
proud member of Omega Psi Phi
Yes.
Fraternity Incorporated, Beta Chapter, Lincoln University.
Okay.
And when I was in high school, trying to figure things out, my guidance counselor, Mr. Simmons, shout out to him. He was an Omega.
Okay.
He was always one to take time, pull me aside.
Mhm.
And just young Charles was trying to figure out, well, where do I fit in life? What's for me?
Mhm.
What what path should I take? And he valued education so much. He was always someone with the door open. And then my track coach, James McCaskill, he was a Q as
Oh
well.
my goodness.
And so, and he again would pull me aside,
Mhm.
and of course, both of them in their own way. When you get to college, check out the Qs. So,
Yes.
but they were approachable, and for me, I think growing up, I was really curious, just
Yeah.
questions. Well, why did this person say this? And with parents involved with civil rights, I was trying to get a vocabulary for the things that were going on. Like why is it like this in this neighborhood? Why am I dealing with these issues here and there? And I think they gave me a vocabulary to navigate it, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know personally, I've always had a problem with having a vocabulary for
Yeah,
the things that I've seen. And that's why I've been to
yeah.
school so much and
Same here.
try to
Yeah.
write books about it.
Mhm.
And I feel like just at 40 something, I started to get a vocabulary
Wow.
didn't come from, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but my parents weren't equipped to
Mm.
give me a vocabulary. I was
Yeah.
basically trying to give them one most of the time.
Respect.
So I understand that. I
Yeah.
definitely do. And I'm still trying to articulate what is going on in this world.
Yeah, good
What do
question.
you think?
My
What's
goodness.
happening in 2025? How would you explain what's happening now?
That's a huge question. I'll say this, and when you said what's going on, my
Mhm.
mind went straight back to Marvin
I
Gaye.
know. What's
What's
going on?
going on?
It's the same thing going on.
There are, oh boy, even as we're in this Holy Week, remembering
Yes.
Christ, and maybe someone's watching this may not be religious or spiritual, but I just think we as a people, Black folks, have
Mm.
had to make sense of injustice.
Mhm.
And sometimes that injustice with people who are saying they believe in God, but yet
Mhm.
treating people so poorly.
Mhm.
But the one I read about in scriptures, who healed the sick, raised the dead.
Mhm.
He was kind, loving, and just, and fair, and right. And sound like we're turning to church service here.
That's okay.
I
We had
I
church
I
in.
I can look to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for those answers.
Mhm.
And sometimes the answer on 2025, I may not be able to impact global affairs,
Mhm.
but how I love my neighbor,
Yes.
how I treat the person who's an immigrant, how I treat someone who's different from me. Maybe
Mhm.
my enemy
Right.
will speak volumes about the faith that I profess. At the same time, when I am ill treated, not to sound boo-hooish,
Yeah.
I know I'm here on purpose and
Yeah.
I can live, love, work on purpose. That's one of the
Right.
trainings I have. And so with 2025, I think hurt people.
Okay.
And a lot of times unresolved issues are easily put out on other people versus to say what's going on with me. And we have that on all different levels. So,
Okay.
so I don't know how
So
helpful that
I don't know.
is.
I was thinking the answer was
Yeah.
so we're not going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, as a friend of mine said, I personally don't want to go, but there
No,
are
we
there
gotta
are
go.
folks who, I'll
Mhm.
say it this way,
Mhm.
what's in the heart comes out the mouth,
Mm.
and there's even a teaching that what out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks,
Yes.
and there's some tie in there that I'm thinking about it, and I'll go back to young Charles. Don't let the suit fool you. He might cuss you out. And that's part of where my mindset
Yeah.
was, and versus trying to find the good in people.
Mhm.
And then also speaking up for those who can't speak up for themselves. So I think in 2025, justice issues they're really important. They always were,
Right.
but it costs to say, it's not right to mistreat people
Yeah.
of different ethnicities, backgrounds, and as you know, in HR work,
Right.
we're to be equitable to everybody, faith, no faith, orientations, how you treat people, I think is a reflection of more what's going on in you than in the other
Yes.
person. So anyway, I
Yes.
hope that helps, but
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Preach.
yeah, trying.
Hope you're listening. Yes. So on my way here, I was talking to my cousin, and we're getting ready to have a big dinner at our house on Sunday. And I told her I was going to share this story because what you said kind of inspired me to remember that. And I was getting ready to spend a bunch. It's so simple, but it's not. But I was getting ready to spend few $100s on renting some tables and chairs. I'm getting ready to
Oh,
have people over at
nice.
my house, and I'm thinking, I don't want to spend a few $100s. And so the people who were coming, I just started texting them. I'm like, "Do you have a table? Do you have a chair?" And in less than 5 minutes, I
Wow.
ended up getting 4 large tables,
Wow.
15 chairs,
Nice.
and from my community, from the people who were coming. And I'm like, that's what we need to get back to.
Pull together.
Why do I need
Yeah.
to spend $300 when you have a chair, you got a
Right.
table, and then the one woman had a bunch of tablecloths. So I
Yeah.
was going to go run around Amazon, buy
Yeah.
tablecloths. She's like, "Oh, I got teal, pink, purple, and white. Which one do you want?"
That's
I
right.
said, "Okay." But I
Yeah.
mean, it seemed like, and I just was so touched by that because, sometimes we just forget to ask
Yes.
or to give. If I
Yeah.
have 10 tablecloths, why can't I give 2 of these tablecloths? I know it sounds real simple,
Yeah.
but that's what
Yeah.
we need more than ever. I
That's
think
right.
God is putting us in a
Yeah.
position in 2025
Yeah.
where we have to look at our neighbor and
Yeah.
check on our neighbor, make
Yeah.
sure
How you doing?
how you doing. They could
Yeah.
that maybe they're affected by some of these layoffs, or
Yes.
they're just struggling with things.
Mhm.
Maybe their family member was deported,
Yeah. That's right.
or they're
Yeah.
scared. I have
Mhm.
people in my church right now
Yeah. That's right. Living in fear.
living in fear because they think they're going to be deported, and their cousins or
Yeah.
siblings.
Wow.
So they're literally like sitting in my house crying because their brother might be deported back to another country.
You touched on something there,
Mhm.
and those examples that people are carrying, and folks may not know,
Mhm.
and this thing of empathy. We needed empathy at work, empathy in our community, and checking in on each other.
Yes.
And so in this season, of course, where folks are going through layoffs and deportation and so many other things, or just even if we set aside even 2025, just in general, I've worked with individuals who may have had a death in the family or have had a child that was incarcerated or a child
Right.
that, is in a hole because of psych issues. And they're so grateful that you say, hey, how are you? How's it going today?
Right.
And if you need to talk. And I found just in some of the roles I've had as even as a chaplain or support staff in different places, that when folks are able to communicate, you could see a burden kind of lifting from them.
Yeah.
And just healthy work environments and healthy neighbors that we show up for each other. And I think we do see some of that from time to time.
Right.
Like when we've had disasters, people pitch in a hand.
Yeah.
Some of my work with the different groups overseas where, I recall some floods in Africa and how villages were pulling together and they were able to rebuild after major disasters. And when the corn crops and everything regrew, they were able to look back and say, this is what we did together.
Nice.
And as a village, they were tighter. And we could do that here too. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to learn how to do that better.
Absolutely.
I think capitalism and just greed is really what is the poison that stops us from giving more.
Wow, you touched on something.
Okay.
That's okay. I could say it this way. Like most systems, it just depends on how you use it. And I know this is capitalist society and there are other societies. I've found even in traveling to different places where people have empathy or have care. I recall in 2007 visiting Ukraine and just some wonderful folks there who welcomed me in their home. And granted, there's a conflict there now, but folks who were in a communist system and they had debates as to what was better then versus now. And certainly they're at war and my prayers are with them. I just wanted to highlight how loving they were, how inspiring they were. And I'll give you an example of this. When this is getting a little political here, but when the Russians had left parts of their country, their orphanages were often state-run, and when the communists left, a lot of them were unserved. There was no staff. And so many Ukrainians went in and adopted those kids like they were their own or staffed them, or even some churches went and sent people and they pulled together. And so you could see that all around the world, that where people have that empathy, have that love for neighbor. And in our working world, somehow we can find common ground. And if we find a way to work together, it makes it better for everybody.
Well, my first thought, and I don't know if the audience is thinking the same thing, but what is a Black man doing in Ukraine?
Great question. Well, at the time
That's what I want to know.
Enjoying visiting, and it was a huge privilege. And I wish well the folks at Children's Hunger Fund. There's a charity. They're still at work today. At the time, I think the mission statement then was serving children in need across America, around the world. And they're a big focus on compassion and helping communities be compassionate. So I went there, had the privilege to go there to visit our partners. And there was a donor at the time that donated for some 70 plus beds for an orphanage. And at the same time, we're able to visit. So my task was to follow up, to go along with a colleague named Fred Martin. And so we took the donors there. And I can honestly say that whole time, and to go with your thing, what's a Black man doing in Ukraine? And this may sound unbelievable, but I was warmly received there.
I
would say like 9 out of 10 folks I came across were really like, welcome.
Were they trying to take pictures with you? Did they think you were Michael Jordan?
Now, I will admit there were a few cases where some thought I'm 6'5", so I'm somewhat tall. There was maybe a handful of people that thought, maybe I'm with the Lakers.
Right.
But for the most part, there was a sense of curiosity of what's LA like? How do you like our country? Right. You know when somebody's treating you warmly, like as an equal, and versus, something kind of weird. And it shocked me because my initial impression when I arrived, I thought, am I going to be welcome? Is it going to be strange? But I really was warmly welcomed, which ties into something with me. I think when people have a healthy value of human beings in general, that it can show up with how you treat people. So that may sound really basic, but that's what I experienced.
It shows up. It shows up when you're driving through LA.
There you go.
And, one time I had a gentleman at church talk about hospitality on the road.
Hey, there you go.
When someone's cutting in front of you, let them go.
Let them go.
Let them go.
Yeah, they could be maybe rushing to work. They could have somebody in the car, could be in labor. They got to get to
They could be having a heart attack. I always say that. So just let them go.
Let them go. I appreciate that. And being one that drives a 405, I have to remember that because you're right. And that's empathy too.
Yeah. So now what can we do for the people in the Ukraine and different...
Wow.
So we have the Ukraine, we have people in Africa hurting, we have people in our own country hurting. How are we supposed to deal with all, not that you have to answer to all of it, but you've traveled all around the world.
Wow.
What's some of the things we can do? Is there just one fund that we should donate to?
Goodness.
Just what are your thoughts?
That's huge.
What do you do?
I'm honored that you had asked the question because let me say this, that, we have limits of what we can do when we see tragedies unfold. I can probably list 5 hot spots around the world that someone may be really passionate about. If I say, the DR Congo is having issues that we don't hear about, or if I say certain places in the Middle East and you could probably create a list of places that on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of trauma and trouble, that it would motivate you.
Yeah.
But I will say this, even though we can't do everything, we can do something.
Okay.
And I think generally speaking, one of the challenges that we have is learning to have a broader perspective.
Thank you.
First off, be curious, what is life like for this person? I grew up in Long Branch, New Jersey. I'm a city kid. I have family from New York all the way down to Georgia. I am not familiar with Montana. I'm not familiar with Idaho. I'm not familiar. So, and I'm saying this not to throw shade on people from there, but if I were working alongside someone, I say, hey, what's it like there? How do you find LA compared to that? And that sense of curiosity, I think in many ways fights our prejudices.
Yes.
And I had some friends that, they say, hey, Chuck, I don't know many Black dudes, let alone some from the city. What is life like for you? And so having a sense of curiosity and a broader perspective, it helps people to be better aware of how to look at things. So if I say, hey, we do have some foreign issues. And as we're talking about, even I'm saying Ukraine, whoa, I have a few people I know here who are from there. And how do they feel knowing that their country is at war? Literally, I know how I would feel if somebody says, hey, there was fighting in New Jersey. Or similarly, there was a shooting down in Orange County. I hope this isn't too heavy for the crowd. I have a dear friend at UCLA who is from not Thailand, Taiwan, and there was immigrant communities that were targeted because of their Asian background. And I just checked in. I say, hey, how are you doing with this? And then this person processed the pain of knowing that there's certain people with Asian hate. And then conversely, there have been issues that happen, and they say, Charles, I'm sorry, but I saw on the news, how are you? So just having a broader perspective and a curiosity, it creates an environment where we can really show up for each other so that when we're doing the regular work in business, I know that, this person, in addition to these transactions, they actually care about me enough to ask.
Yeah.
So,
and people ask that all the time about, and what I hear you kind of describing is allyship.
Okay.
And people always ask me about, well, what does allyship mean? How can I be a good ally? And really the answer you just shared is what I tell them. Be curious. Don't assume that you know how to be an ally. How do you know to be an ally to me if you don't understand my culture? You don't understand what I'm going through.
Yes.
And so if you want to be an ally, you have to immerse yourself into the person's life and understand. I mean, you don't have to live with them, but you got to know what, hey, I have family in Ukraine and my sister's in the Ukraine right now, and this is what I need. So that's what allyship is about.
Yes.
And a lot of times people want to be an ally, but in their own, they want to just do it their way. And is similar to cultural competence, right?
Wow.
It's like,
well said.
You don't have cultural competence because you don't know the culture.
You touching on something got to know it versus like imposing something.
Right. Telling us what we should do.
Yeah.
Or telling the culture what they should, the person of that culture, what they should do. You need to ask.
Ask questions. That
sounds simple. It's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's kind of humbling. Like I don't know. Like literally, unless you tell me, I won't know. And then if I jump to some judgment, I don't know if I give an example of this, but when we used to do relief and aid work, we had this idea of, okay, maybe we give them this food or this item. And then I recall in partnerships, they were like, we actually don't need that. We're working on this.
Right.
And so there was times where some of the partners in the charity work I did, it was instructional. I had to kind of step back from certain preconceived notions. I think just in the sense of team collaboration, or as you mentioned, allyship, ask questions like, hey, what's it like?
Let's roll that back for the audience because preconceived notions.
Oh boy. Yeah.
What is that? Because I don't want that to slide by.
Yeah. We can carry a certain perspective and project it on the people. I mean, gives an example. I love examples. I recently got some glasses.
Okay.
And I see the world quite differently.
Okay.
But let's say those preconceived notions come from how we grew up, who we grew up around, what we heard, what we learned, the examples. If someone says, hey, Charles, where's the best place for pizza? I would say such place on the Jersey Shore.
Okay.
And that's from my experience where someone would say maybe from New York, or someone would say, hey, California has some good pizza too.
Right.
So we carry our preconceived notion. We're often not aware.
Yeah.
And so when we interact with someone in the workplace, we can kind of project that onto them.
Right. Can I tell you, I had a preconceived notion that everyone got high in the world.
Oh, wow. Hey, it's understandable.
Like, so everyone in my neighborhood, people I knew, everyone got high. Everyone in my family.
I get it.
And so I would watch TV and I would think they're high. Like everyone is high. Yeah. And I just thought people was high all the time. I just thought everyone got high. And then I thought Black people didn't have cars. Only white people had cars.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know any Black people who had a car. When I was really young.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that was where you were in your experience, and no judgment here. Where I grew up, to be a man meant you were able to fight, able to be athletic, and stand up for yourself. And sometimes that preconceived notion in my mind limited a broader perspective. You can be artistic, expressive. Cry, have some emotions, feel things.
Do the arts.
And so, so we often carry those things around, but I respect what you're sharing from your journey.
Oh, yeah. I had a journey.
Same here.
Well, okay. So one of the things I deal with a lot, I wore my beautiful Senegalese beads and matching earrings.
Nice.
And I love Senegal. I found out that my DNA is from West Africa.
Nice.
I mean, I don't know if I said that right, but I have DNA.
Your ancestry.
My ancestry.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning about Africa. And I was one of those people, so I can't be judgy.
Yeah.
That was like, well, why would you go to Africa? I'm scared because we were taught. Yeah. Well, we were just taught that it's not safe there. We saw movies like Hotel Rwanda. Didn't even know that's not Senegal. That's Rwanda.
Yes, right.
And there's a different place, Central Africa. And there's just a lot of fears. And then now that I've been to Africa twice, thank you. I'm so grateful. I want to live in Africa. Like I really felt my ancestors calling me back to Africa, but not to be judgy because I was the same way. But now it drives me, I just get so, not upset, but like anxious. I don't know. When I hear people say they don't like Africa.
But they don't know.
Because they don't know. But I was the same way. But now that I've had that experience, I just want to drag people to Africa.
Sure.
Go to Africa. So, you know, I'm grateful to get to, so in full disclosure and transparency, President Charles Chuck Clemons and I, we serve, I know, but now I'm being official. We serve on the San Fernando Valley Divine Nine board.
Yes, right.
And I'm the secretary.
Glad to be a part.
And he's the president.
Yes, indeed.
But we get to do some amazing things, and part of the committees we served on, one of them is Africa. So we're always looking to educate people and grow
service projects.
So, all right. So tell me how you got to Africa. Was this from working on that in that nonprofit?
It was first in the nonprofit. And although I will say that there were folks from Africa that I had the privilege to meet prior to working with that organization, and then certainly in the community. But while working with that organization, I had the privilege to go to Africa at least 22 times.
Oh, wow.
Uganda, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Egypt. And those are just some to think of, and a few brief layovers here and there. And Africa is wonderful. It has different cultures, and I think of classmates I studied with from Africa, some in seminary, a gentleman I'm thinking of from Ethiopia. I know a gentleman, great guy from Madagascar. And the thing about Africa is this, just like a diamond has different facets, Africa in terms of culture, people, foods, experiences, so multifaceted. And it's a fact that historically people have been fearful of Africa because of limited knowledge. And unfortunately, the legacy of colonialism, the legacy of so many atrocities in Africa, that tends to get the lion's share of attention, maybe 10% of the story, where so many in Africa are highly educated, successful, have communities that are healthy and strong, rich, and they value, I even think of a friend of mine from Nigeria how they honor the elderly and the seniors. And that's something I've seen across Africa, that if you're an older person, you get this prominent place. And just the respect for one another. And so those have been my experiences. Great times. On a funny note, I remember one place visiting, and the chief, this is in the Zima area of Ghana, he welcomed us into his home, welcomed us into his court. He just said, hey, whenever you're here, you are welcome by me. And literally in his gathering, he invited us to sit among his elders and chiefs. And we were treated like kings. And this gentleman, God rest his soul, he had been sick for some time, but he shared his heart's passion to see his community educated, resources, infrastructure built up. And he just would walk us around and point out things and all these projects. And in those moments, just even reflecting back on it, he kind of reminded me of my dad.
Oh.
It was that same kind of like, I'm in this for us. That's a leader. That's a leader. And so yeah, those were some great experiences. Far from the Tarzan stories and crazy stuff. That's stories about Africa.
I like Tarzan, by the way. But I had a moment. I was at some hotel traveling somewhere. I can't even remember. I think I was in Vegas, and I was watching these old Tarzan movies.
Edgar Rice.
And there was one where these two white guys was coming to save Jane, because Jane had stayed with Tarzan now. So it was like the fifth Tarzan movie or something. And Jane is just swimming and just hanging out, fighting the alligators.
That's right. I mean, bizarre.
It was just very bizarre.
Yeah. And I say it tongue in cheek. And granted, Edgar Rice Burroughs, a writer, his
I didn't even know it.
Martian stories. But unfortunately, many Americans, and it kind of shows our ignorance. It shows America. I mean, I love America. This is where I'm from.
Yes.
But we going back to perspective.
Right. Think about it.
If a person's experience with Africa is only based off of what they see on the TV, you're missing out. It's when Black Panther came out and we were saying Wakanda, there were actually people who thought Wakanda is a
real place,
little place. I mean, there is high tech in Africa, many places.
We need to build a Wakanda, but it doesn't exist.
That's a fictional place.
Wakanda is fictional.
Just
somebody's watching right now, like, that's the one thing they walked away with. Wakanda's not real.
Yeah, it's in our hearts. It is.
It is. You can create one. You can go to Africa and build. We can build our own Wakanda.
Hey, and
I think they're trying to do.
There's many, and if I'm not to be facetious, but there are many beautiful areas in Africa. In Kigali, for example, Rwanda has one of the most high-tech environments in the world. They were wired for internet in so many tech areas ahead of other countries. So,
not know that.
But that's and
that's Kenya.
No, that's Kigali is in Rwanda.
That's in Rwanda. I'm sorry.
Rwanda. No worries. All good.
I'm still learning United States geography too.
Hey, no worries. All good.
Well, when's your next trip? Is it going to be when we plan our trip for the Divine Nine?
That's the goal.
I got a question for you too. So that's the goal. Okay. Yeah. So here's a question that comes up all the time. So it's clear you believe in God. Holy Spirit, the Trinity, you are a Christian.
I'm striving.
How can you be a Christian and also be Greek, serving in a Greek fraternity?
Great question.
People ask that a lot.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm grateful that God loves me. And part of the story of Christianity is something called the gospel. And it's good news that a God who's good, right, and true and holy is willing to offer up his son for our sins. And 3 days later, he would rise again. So that's the bedrock for my faith and my life. The connection with, for those who aren't aware, when we say D9, National Panhellenic Council, so forth, our great-grandparents, many of our forefathers founded these organizations, and they have a Christian legacy, meaning that they often were service organizations on campuses giving an outlet for, in many cases, Black students who were excluded from other things. Here's how we can foster manhood, scholarship, perseverance, uplift. Those are 4 cardinals of Omega. And we can also lift as we climb. For those of you watching, if I say Mary Church Terrell, she very much a early civil rights leader and very much a moral and godly woman. It gave to us and many of our organizations this impetus that we're going to climb and pursue better for ourselves, and we're going to lift others at the same time.
Yeah, before we go too far, Delta, Sigma Theta, Delta.
There you go, Delta
right.
Sigma.
They don't want to lead. They don't want to go too far. Mary Church Terrell's Delta.
There you go.
Sigma Theta.
And your organization, you are a member of the same one.
Yeah.
And I give that as an example because at our best, we hold to that legacy as opposed to a bad example. Because just even with the church, not everyone in our organizations holds to those values, which we should, but many do, and we want to highlight that part.
Yeah, one thing I really, first of all, Delta was something I never knew. The experience I never knew I needed. The sisterhood I never knew I needed. Now the brothers I never knew. I would have never, ever thought that I would become a Delta. And one of the first things I learned was our involvement in the suffrage and the women's rights movement, suffrage, which is the right to vote. And when the white women were out there getting tomatoes and potatoes, whatever, thrown at them, and their, partners, spouses didn't want them to march, Delta, what we're known for is joining in with the white women in a very dangerous time
Very dangerous.
to march for women's voters' rights. And we were the first to do so. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
There you go.
So that's who I tap into in our 22 founders. We just had Founders Day. Madri Penn White, she spoke 4 languages. She helped come up with the policies for Delta. And she's doing this. There's no internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if they had a typewriter.
Probably all by hand.
They just writing, I don't even know, trying to find some ink.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they had no car. They probably didn't have a car.
Yeah, horse and buggy mostly.
Horse and buggy. And they probably couldn't even drive. But they got things done.
They did.
And I think about that every day. And that's our ancestors and the legacy of, to me, of, our sororities and fraternities. And I love being in just because I'm going on.
Absolutely.
I love being in the Pan-Hellenic Council because it embraces so people don't know this. I know because they ask me all the time. Sure. It embraces all of the sororities and fraternities. Right. And we get to be one divine nine.
Yeah, that's our nickname. And we work together. And we celebrate the great work of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And as you share, also celebrating all of the groups because
AKAs. How you doing? You my sister.
There you go. As we would say with the fraternities, alphas and kappas, the sigmas and iotas and so forth. I find it fascinating, just as you mentioned, the suffragist movement. Mm-hmm. We're talking about something that would shape the working world in America for generations. And that great work, which often was from those foundations that were moral, like, is it fair how we treat groups of people when it comes to how we elect? So women in particular. Let me just say that specific. So I'm excited that that's your legacy and it's a part of mine too.
Excited too.
Yeah,
it's so proud. So speaking of legacy, what I love about books
Thank you.
is this is your legacy. Like no matter what, I mean, they could probably even try to burn these books one day, but they will always be in existence, right? They will always be in the ether and they'll always be available. I hope they never burn them, but we have to fight so they won't burn our books and burn our, this is about undivided, a biblical response to what divides us / the U.S. I like that. I like how it says to what divides us. Yeah. Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, did that on purpose.
Okay.
Kind of
and then it says what divides the U.S. So tell us about this book and then this is with Equip Press. Are they both with Equip Press?
The first is with Equip Press. Okay. And that's Undivided, a biblical response to what divides us. And I can definitely dive into that.
Let's go.
Yeah, and
and then this one, The Essential Guide to Public Speaking. This is pretty thick.
Yeah, that one is a bit of
like a textbook.
Almost. It's getting into. It's a second edition there, and I'm kind of going back through. That one was a direct publish straight to Amazon.
Oh, nice.
And so just that whole thing of being an Amazon writer. So if you see any notes scrawled in there, my apologies because I'm going back through. Need to fix things up with that. But let's talk about Undivided.
Yes, please.
It was written in 2018, and while I was attending seminary working on my MDiv, I found myself...
What's an MDiv?
Master's Divinity. And so I'm honored to... Sorry about that.
That's
put
all
that
right.
out there.
Master's in Divinity.
There you go.
Is that your first master's?
That is my only master's at the time. And so I'm striving for more. But that being said, I had the privilege to receive training in looking at the Hebrew text of Scripture, the Greek text of Scripture, and then also historical theology, looking at particularly the Protestant faith from the Apostles' time all the way up to present day. And part of those studies, a good deal of theology, like what does the Bible teach about God? What does the Scriptures teach about Christ, about people? And for those listening who may not, be quote unquote spiritual religious, I'm not here to press that, but I am a Christian, undeniable.
I think you should press it.
Hey, you know, pearls have
They
value.
need help.
Pearls have
People
value
need help.
whether people
They
receive.
miserable.
Well, hey, without Jesus, I would not be here for sure. With that being said, he's the pearl of great price. So
Yes.
catch a hold of him. So yeah, while I was there, part of my interest, because my mom was in Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, she marched and she was at the sit-ins. And so I found myself drawn to what does the Bible say about really racism? And because that word is thrown around a lot.
Right.
And why is it that for so long on a Sunday morning, most churches, not all in America, about 11 o'clock, pretty much people are in different corners. Dr. King famously said the most segregated hour in America is 11. Right. So I found myself, again, this curious Charles, asking questions. And then combining it with that, I found that there were people sometimes that would express, you know, a love for Jesus, but then they would be associated with like nationalist movements, like some cases just as blatant as the KKK.
Right.
Or in other cases, they would be kind of neo-Nazi and all this. So before what happened on January 6th, I had been researching this for decades. Not decades, I say at least solid 10 years. Yeah. And in 2018, I sat down and I went through scriptures. Like, what does the Bible say about the love of God? Like, literally, what are the words that he communicates, who he loves and how he loves? Right. And so that's a part of the book. Then I looked at the compassion of God. Like, and this is repeated, and you know, I, Lord, am compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in mercy. And I found, and I'm going somewhere with this.
No, keep going.
So the story of Jonah, to me, in some ways reflects the Christian nationalists in America. Because Jonah was a prophet of God, heard the voice of God, but when God said, hey, I'm calling you to speak to those Ninevites, he was like, I'm going the opposite direction. Yeah. And throughout the story, and it's more than a fish story, God is using events and circumstances and natural events, even the fish, to guide Jonah to the task of bringing a message to these Ninevites, of which they turned to God, they repented. Yeah. And at the end of the story, we find out what Jonah's issue. And here's the tie-in with racism. Jonah is angry. He's so angry he wishes to die. And God says, do you have a right to be angry? He said, yeah, I do have a right to be angry because I knew you were going to show those folks compassion.
Right.
And God teaches Jonah that there are thousands of children in that city, thousands of people who don't know their left from their right. And that's kind of a condensed flyover.
That was a good example.
But I use that in the book to say that America, who many times calls itself a Christian nation, has a documented history of exalting one group of people, and sadly, in many cases, white supremacists, over ethnic groups, Native Americans, immigrants, and we are all God's children. Women, you know, you could, I'm missing somebody. Yeah. So what I get into the book is I give the story of that scripture, but then I give examples. Like I had a friend of mine, he's from Iraq, and he attended a church one time, and he's a Christian. He's actually an Iraqi Christian, and people may get mad at this, but I'll give the example.
Make them mad.
He goes to this church and he's there, and they're singing songs, but then they move towards like a patriotic service, and then they show like people, you know, fighting and showing war scenes, and he's horrified about this, and people start chanting in church, USA, USA, USA. Now he's in Iraq,
like
Iraqi born. He's like, what did I thought I was here to hear about Jesus.
Right.
And he started to leave, and he said these words, which I'll never forget. He says, because some of them were saying even bomb. And he says, here's the thing. If you would put your children in a plane and put them in a room with my children in Iraq, would you be quick to drop those bombs?
Right.
And I never forgot that. And so
So sad.
so Undivided gets into really the heart of the matter,
Mhm.
compassion, what the Bible says, and I got tons of notes in
I
there,
see. This is good.
about how do we love people, including our enemies, which
Yeah.
so and the other part is addressing our legacy.
Mhm.
History is not a popular subject because it
Mhm.
has the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
And in that regard, yeah, every country, I love America, this is my country,
Yeah.
but we have a history.
Right.
And every nation has a history. And if we're unwilling to face it, I
Right.
mean, I have a history. But if we can face
Yeah.
what was, it can help us to go forward.
Thank you.
So,
That
yeah.
was just wow. Again, this is one of those you're welcome moments because that was so well said and so inspirational, but with such grace.
I'm trying.
I would just be like, y'all need to do better. That's all I was about to say.
I'll say I need to do better too.
See, I would say y'all. I wouldn't even say me. I would just say them. So I'm learning too, learning grace, and thank you. That's what I heard and what you shared. And yeah, I mean, all throughout the Bible, you see one of my favorite stories. I'm definitely not going to try to tell it as eloquent as you just did, but the Samaritan woman.
Yeah.
And how Jesus approached someone, they're like, are you going to Samaritan?
That's right.
And you're talking to this woman.
And he went to her.
They're from Samaria, right? Samaria. I knew I said it wrong. From
That's okay. Samaritan woman.
From Samaria.
Yeah.
And it was like saying, Jesus, where are you going down? You going down to Compton? Like,
that's right. Yeah. I'm going there.
I'm going
that's
down
where 6th and Spring. We're going down to Skid Row.
That's where the Bloods and the Latin Kings and
that's right.
Do you know you're talking to a Latin queen?
There you go.
or
that's Jersey.
Blood, right?
Yeah, back east. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what it would be like.
There's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
Even someone faith or non-faith, when we talk about compassion as a value, that's love in action or empathy. And it's easy in this environment to move away from people that we're repelled by or we don't like versus like an example of Jesus. I got to go to Samaria. Story has it that the people would often from that portion of Jerusalem would travel out of the way to avoid Samaria. And I think we have something of that here. People, flee or move away from groups of folks. Yes. But when we come together at work, it's up to each of us. I can't judge anyone else, but am I willing to be curious?
Exactly.
Am I willing to say, hey, what do you think about this? Or even have a sense of empathy to care enough to see how this person's doing without judgment. And I love that example you gave about, the Latin Kings or Skid Row. I've worked with individuals who are unhoused, and they've taught me things about life. Right. They've taught me things about contentment that have challenged my preconceptions. Like, whoa, this person is more at home with who they are than maybe in some ways I am, because they've maybe lost it all, but in the process they found who they are, who they're not. And in some of those instances, come across them in the healthcare setting, they're like, hey, I value me. That's why I say yes or no to these kinds of treatment. And anyway,
I love it. So I always shout out my middle son, Chris. His name is Chris Black.
Chris Black.
Changed his name from Thatch to Black.
Okay.
And we respect that.
Okay.
And so Chris Black, he works in housing, helping people like people on Skid Row and different struggling with unhoused situations. He helps them. He'll literally pick them up off the street. Now, I'll see a homeless person. I'll admit it, an unhoused person. And if they smell or something, I want to walk away. My son, who I raised and gave birth to, he will pick them up and put them in his car and take them to motor vehicles, take them to get a shower, take them to get their ID, walk them through the housing process so they can get home housing.
That's amazing. So he's making a huge impact. He's the best
part of me.
Hey.
So no, he's making a huge impact. And that's just a special person who does that. And I'm trying, I do work with the homeless.
Absolutely.
I would keep saying homeless, but I mean unhoused.
That's okay.
And anyhow, so we talked a little bit about the workplace. I'm going to talk about the workplace, and then I want to hear what's next for you. So what we talked about, this empathy,
Yeah.
racism, all the different things, and what you said just a minute ago, we're working with these people. I always say, you know, I've worked in populations where there's like 10, 15,000 people in the company.
Yeah.
We had unhoused people.
Yeah.
I'm working with people who are sleeping in their car.
That's right.
I'm working with people who are struggling from drug addiction. Yeah. I'm working with people who are either the victim of domestic violence or the perpetrator of domestic violence. I'm working with people who just shot somebody. Right. Like, so you're working in, you know, when you're dealing with work environments, you're working with people who make up this society. You're working with someone who just came from the Ukraine. You're working with someone who, you know, just moved from India. And you have to learn how to work with all these people. So a lot of times when I talk about the podcast, you know, I say it's about humans. People don't get, like, people think human resources is, okay, I need to be hired or I need to be fired. Yeah. But it's learning how to work and develop humans. So I just want to give you a moment to, what do you think about that?
That's a great conversation and a question, because we are working with humans.
Yes.
And I know we talked a bit about spiritual things. There is a sense that human work that you're describing, there are common values that we all can come together around, or at least be open to, like compassion, which in many ways it's an act of love towards others, like empathy, thinking and caring about someone from their perspective, like integrity, like excellence, like service. Many companies you go in, you see those big wall posters
like
and
service posters.
It'll show you, here are our values.
Say compassion, and then have like a lion running, not eating a deer.
Exactly, something like, or mercy, or compassion. Well, and at our best, maybe when those values are at work, then the human part of human resources, and I'm new to this space of human resources, and I'm grateful. I definitely want to give a shout out to one of the organizations I'm presently contracting and working with, New Leaf Training and Development. They're a wonderful, phenomenal group. And there is a sense that beyond the technical parts, as you mentioned, hiring, firing, policies, procedures, people tend to gravitate towards those things, but who we are affects what we do.
Exactly.
Who we are affects what we do. And one of the workshops that I've developed is called Empathy at Work.
Yes.
And when leaders are developing that aspect of their own character, then what they do has a certain depth to it.
Yes.
I gave the example of my father and the African chief, where they got things done. They had practices, but people knew that they were cared for by that leader.
Right.
Which builds trust. Like, when I know that the person that's leading me really cares about me and my family, then I can show up differently. I have more freedom to be creative. I can fail. And granted, we may have to have boundaries, because sometimes people may take advantage of it. But empathy at work is big. I have, and just to that question of what's next, I have a workshop called, I plan to continue and expand the trainings that I offer. One is called On Purpose Leadership, where people can find out what their unique gifting, talent is, and be inspired to show up with that. And then, of course, that I just mentioned, the empathy at work. And then being able to do more leadership development trainings and or keynotes. Because if people are inspired, then they show up and they give their all. A statistic right now, I think it's Gallup poll, has that roughly 50 to 60% of people are quietly quitting at work.
Yes, quiet quitting.
So folks are showing up for the check and they're showing up physically, but they're not showing up with their creativity, with their enthusiasm. And a part of what I do, this is going back to what you shared at the beginning, I may not promise millions of dollars, but I will promise that when people are tapped into their passion and a sense of purpose, you will be so fired up with your work because you're in alignment with your purpose.
I love that.
And if you have a staff that are doing that, let's flip that 50, 60%. Where people are showing up at work 90%. One of the stats from the trainings I get, 93% of people who've gone to my training that say, yeah, I can use this in the workplace. This is going to help me. And so I send them back more fired up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I hope y'all fired up. I can't give y'all any better guess. I don't know what you want. No, I'm just kidding.
Too kind.
Listen to
Thank
this
you.
2 or 3 times. So now what's next for you?
Well, continuing to develop the trainings, which I have with Charles Clemons LLC.
Okay.
Definitely continuing service with National Panhellenic Council, D9.
Yes, we need you.
We have programs going there, which I love those service projects.
Yeah.
I'll be traveling and doing some speaking soon.
Nice. Book tour.
Well, we're going to plan for that. What's next? Getting into. I have a history book coming out in the fall called Untold Black History: 7 Men Who Shaped America, and that's not to limit it to just those 7, but I get into from the Black conquistadors who actually traveled in early 1500s all the way up to modern day civil rights. And telling
I didn't
the
know
story.
anything about that.
Oh yeah,
that's why I'm going to need to read this book.
There you go. We'll get that out to you. Yeah,
that is amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, where can people reach you if they want to work with you?
They can go to my website and schedule or book me or reach out to Charles Lee Clemons Jr. .com.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay. Charles Lee. Would it be Charles Lee Clemons Jr. on LinkedIn?
Well, that one would be just Charles Clemons.
Charles Clemons.
On LinkedIn. And we'll get you that info, of course. So you'll see.
Yeah, we're going to have it on the screen.
Yeah. So you'll see me there on LinkedIn, Charles Clemons. And yeah, between those two, there'll be a way to click the link and reach out.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Check out the books again and check out Charles Lee Clemons, 1M. Just Google, Google works. Look him up. Look at my website. You can find me at thelathatch.com. Please like, share, subscribe. How do you have 20,000 views, but you got 166 followers? So y'all need to be viewing and clicking and subscribing.
It's growing. There you go.
So, yeah, he's so positive. I'm telling y'all, like, subscribe. Also, I had some really good news this.
Let's hear.
And by the time this airs, it'll be even stronger. So one of the products that I created, Mrs. HR in a Box, is a website, but now it's also an app.
There you go. Right.
So download Mrs. HR in a Box from the App Store. And if you download it, by the time you see this, it will be free. You'll get some free materials, free information, and then, of course, you can upgrade later. So I'm so excited to do this with you and bring amazing, smart, intelligent Black men and women and others to you to learn from. And so stay tuned. If you'd like to be on the show, reach out to me, DM me. You have all of my information, but stay tuned for another episode of the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. And until next time, be well.